Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week it is finally here. We are on the final stretch to doing the rust treatment and getting the car ready to lay on some paint. Yes! Okay, so I know some of you have been wondering where Archie has been. You haven't seen Archie on the channel for a while, and that's pretty much because I haven't been driving it. It's really wasted sitting in the garage. So some of you might be upset to know that I am actually selling Archie. So Archie is a nice, clean 996 manual coupe with a good history, but not all the cars on the market out there are, and that brings us to today's video sponsor, which is Car Vertical. Car Vertical is actually a site that more than likely is running in whatever country you are watching from at the moment, and it's actually a really good tool to check and see a car's history and see what sort of condition it's in. Let me give you an example of one of Car Vertical's reports here and what you're actually getting when you have a look at it. This 911 was recently for sale, and you can sort of see here that the mileage is a nice green tick, hasn't been stolen, hasn't been used as a taxi, but it does have a report that this car has been in an accident and was previously damaged. And if you follow down through the report, you can actually sort of see some of the checks that were done. There's stolen vehicle check in a bunch of different countries, and there's no reports of this particular vehicle being stolen. You can see here the mileage going up in a nice consistent manner that matches in with the vehicle. That all looks above board. And then going down further, you can see in the damage report, it does actually show that this car has been damaged, and also shows the areas in which it might have been damaged. And in this report, if you actually keep going down to the bottom, you can actually have a look at pictures of what the car looked like when it was damaged. And if you were looking at a nice shiny car, you might be surprised to come across something like this. So it is always good to give yourself a bit of a heads up of what you're looking at and the history. And if you're still interested in a car like this, it might give you some bargaining power. So check the guys out, Car Vertical. I don't normally do ads, but they're really helping out the channel, and I think it's a handy little addition to any of you car buyers out there. So check them out, Car Vertical, and let's get on with the rest of the video. All right, guys, welcome back. And those of you who are watching in the last couple of weeks will have seen that I have been getting the panels perfectly flat and even, all of the panel gaps right, so that we can actually start getting the Alfarrari ready for paint. If you missed it, I'll put a link up above so you can catch up, and think about subscribing and hitting those notifications. It does help us out. So, it seems like most people were quite happy with the work last week. I was very happy with the work, getting all these panel gaps nice and even all the way around the car. Yeah, I'm really happy with the result that we've come to so far. And this week it is starting to get into the rust treatment and getting ready to epoxy prime it. So many of you have seen this bonnet bulge. Some of you hate it, some of you don't mind it, but it's a necessary evil on this car. But one of the things is I still want to go through on this particular panel where these joins are. I want to go through and have a go at something that I haven't done before, and that is lead solder finishing. So particularly around these seams, around these joints, I want to actually tackle it with lead and not just with body filler, regular bog, as we call it here in Australia. That is a whole new thing that I haven't done before, so it's going to be fun to give it a bit of a try. So to start with, we have to get rid of all of the primer on here, get this all back down to shiny bare metal. So that's what I'm going to do first, is hook in and start bare metaling the bonnet. So I start with a DA sander, removing all the weld through primer with 80 grit, and then I'm going back now with some red Scotch Brite, just roughing everything up.
And finally, I'm going to tackle it with the wire wheel and the grinder just to make sure I've got nice shiny bare metal.
Alright, so you can see here I've taken off all of the paint and got it all back nice and shiny bare metal, ready for the next step. And that next step is going to be doing a rust converter. So basically what this does, you still need to get the metal as clean as you possibly can, but this will go on and any little tiny specks of rust that are still around, what this does is this will turn it black and basically kill the rust, stop it dead so that it won't spread anymore. That's the next step. So I'm going to get some Scotch-Brite and some gloves and some glasses and go through and use the Scotch-Brite soaked in the rust converter and go over it all and wipe it all down with that and give it about 10 minutes or so, 10 or 15 minutes. Let it set, let it do its thing. And then we come back, we just clean it off with water, clean it all up, and then we can start doing our lead work. All right, so I've let this sit for about 10 or 15 minutes. So now I've just got some water on a rag. I'm going to go through and I'm wiping all of the acid off and trying to neutralize it, because that's what the rust converter is. The rust converter is an acid, just killing the rust. So we'll go through that now, wipe this all off and then clean it up again. And then we're going to have a go at leading. Now I've just wiped off the acid. I'm going to go back it again with some water on some red Scotch-Brite and just go around and give it another scrub, making sure I get in there, get all of the acid out, and also just sort of rough up the surface again a bit more.
Now make sure I remove all the water, dry it all up, and then blow any water that might be in any little pinholes or anywhere.
Okay, so I've got my whole bonnet now clean, prepared, rust treated. Everything should be completely nice and ready to start doing my leading, which is something I've never tried before, so I'm quite interested in having a go. Now, the reason I'm doing the bonnet on the car is mostly because it can warp and move because I'm adding heat to it. I am worried about any movement, so I just want to make sure. It probably would be much easier if I did it off of the car, but this is where I'm doing it. So let's go through now and start heating it up. I've got basically, first of all, there's tinning paste, which is this stuff. It's sort of got tin and lead in it, I think. And I need to paint it on and then heat it up so that it basically, it's like basically a primer for the lead filler to go into. If you don't use it, then it won't actually stick. So we're going to try that in a sort of just a small area to start with, and then we'll see what happens.
So if you watch close, you can actually see the metal warping and moving with the heat.
All right, so I've just gone through and tinned this area, and basically, yeah, it's just heating up this tin and making sure it's a nice shiny area that the lead will stick to, because the lead won't really stick to this bare metal apparently. So I've spent a bit of time getting that all good. I'm going to go around now and clean this up, and I've also started getting my paddle. I'm going to use this paddle, which is a curved one. It came with the kit that I got, and basically what I need to do is, it also comes with this sort of thing of tallow. I need to heat the tallow up and then basically just get a nice thin covering on this paddle so that it doesn't stick to the lead, and then I can use this to shape the lead when I start putting it in. So let's give it a go.
So I use a new clean wire brush to clean up the tin, and then I go through, here's the tallow, heating it up and coating the paddle, wiping it off. Now, adding the lead is relatively easy, moving it in and just starting to sort of heat and learn how to move it around. So now I come in with a body file and just start to shape the lead. So I start tinning the rest of the front of the bonnet, and I found that it was much easier to wipe off the residue while it was hot, and I'm really starting to get the hang of the tinning of the base metal.
All right, so I'm starting to get the hang of what I need to do with this. So tinning the surface at the start is very, very important. Basically, like I mentioned before, the lead doesn't stick unless you tin it first. You have to make sure you go through after tinning it and wiping it all with water to make sure that it neutralises any of the acid that's underneath there, and then adding the lead and just slowly working it. There's sort of a stage where you can heat it up. If you heat it up too much, it just runs. But if you heat it up to just enough to soften it, you can sort of spread it around and start moving it and shaping it and getting it into place. The only thing I'm not a big fan of, particularly on this bonnet that's already been worked a lot and was already very thin, is that it does warp the panels a lot. Because you're heating it up, the panels start moving everywhere, and then you're trying to sort of fight around that. So anyway, going to continue just working away with this, adding a bit more lead, and we'll see how it all comes together.
So I'm finding here one of the big issues with adding extra lead is that the high spots have no tinning on them because they've been filed off, so that I need to go back and tin it, and they're not getting the lead sticking the way it should, making it quite a difficult process to sort of get the hang of. One of the good things about the lead is you can use a sander and actually sand it, but you need to be extremely careful because lead dust is very poisonous.
All right, so I've been working on this for a while, and there's reasons why they don't use lead anymore. Like it is useful in some ways. The hard bit is that any of these low spots that I need to add a little bit more lead to, the trouble is that you then, to add more lead, end up softening around it and making more of a mess every time you want to sort of add to it, and you wreck what you've already done, as opposed to regular body filler where, yes, you may sand into that again, but it's much harder to apply the lead onto the top and get used to it. And I'm sure those who are good at it and have done it a lot can really do it well, but yeah, there's reasons why it's not done anymore. I'm not going to get this 100% perfect with the lead, but it's going to get it like 90% of the way there, and I'll be able to finish it off with a skim of body filler anyway. But it's definitely been a good learning curve. I'm going to keep going on this front edge and see how nice I can get this, but it's a very, very slow, tedious process. All right, so this is where I'm going to leave it on the front end. I end up chasing my tail going in and out all the time. This strip up here came out pretty good. Again, there's some lows here particularly. Most of the way it's pretty nice. Most of the way along there, it's filled in that edge quite nicely. So I am still going to do the other side. So let's do that now, and then we can leave this lead filling to other people. All right, it's definitely not perfect. I am not a huge fan of the lead work. Probably work well on smaller areas, but particularly in these areas, trying to get it filled, and particularly this is quite ripply. This old bonnet is quite rippled the way the section went in. The bulge is really flat and neat, but the edges of the bonnet, because it was such a big flat area, did ripple a lot. And yeah, it's not the prettiest, but that is good for now. So we are going to move on to stripping this car back and getting it ready so that we can start rust treating the entire thing. I did the same thing on the boot hinges as I did on the door hinges. Because it was perfectly lined up, I drilled a tiny little 2mm hole through the hinge and through the boot so that I can use the back of a rivet or a nail or something to line things up so that I can get them back to the way they were, instead of going through the painstaking task of lining it up every time I bolt them on and off. All right, we are back on the rotisserie, so now it's time to get in with the sander and start prepping everything for paint, so getting it back to bare metal. I'm going to try and get most of the paint off of these panels. All right, I am completely disgusting from all of that. This whole front end I had to hit with a fine flap disc. Definitely not recommended to take paint off with a flap disc. Flap disc can be very harsh and can gouge into the paint. I was very careful, but there was no way this front was coming off with the sander. I sat there for ages in one spot with 40 grit sandpaper and nothing coming off. I know all the other panels sanded off fine, no dramas, 80 grit was perfect to get it off of all of the other new panels, but for some reason, the black stuff that was on the front here, it didn't seem like normal paint. It's really thick. So now I'm gonna go over it all with the 80 grit on the DA and just tidy it all up a bit and make it look a little bit nicer. But man, that was a lot of work. Wow. You can see how much stuff I've got off of the front of this car. It is thick. It was as if the front end had been powder coated. That's how thick it was. So it was just, it really felt like powder coat on the front. It was really, really thick. But in any case, most of the paint on the shell now is removed. I've still got to go over a bit more later, but I am out of time. All right, that was a lot of work getting that all stripped back, and we're getting close to being able to put some epoxy primer on it. There's still a lot of sanding and paint preparation to do before we can do that, but it's getting closer and closer, which is a really good thing. So hopefully next week we'll be able to tackle that. As for the lead filling, it was worth giving it a go, and I definitely am glad that I filled the world seams and stuff like that with the lead filler. It's definitely going to need the touch up with the lightweight body filler, and to be honest, yeah, I'm on even a extremely straight car, you know, that tiny little skim of lightweight body filler is the way to go. You definitely don't want to build a panel out of it, but it does just tidy things up and just gets it spot on. So anyway, that's all I got for this week. So I think that means it's time for fun facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, as we talked about last week, by the end of 1969, Ferrari realised it would have no chance of beating the 5-litre Porsche 917s in its 3-litre 312p prototype. As Ferrari now had an influx of cash after selling half the business to Fiat, Enzo Ferrari decided to meet Porsche head-on by building 25 new 5-litre cars. This car was the new 512S, which ran a 5-litre V12, making 560 horsepower. This required a maze of cooling pipes and a heavy radiator, compared to Porsche's air-cooled flat 12. It also needed a heavier steel frame, compared again to the Porsche's alloy frame, which made it around 100 kilos heavier than the 917, its rival. By the end of 1970, Ferrari had won the 12 Hours of Sebring, with Porsche taking out all 9 of the other races. One of the big things helping Porsche was that they gave direct factory support to the independent teams, without putting strain on the factory itself, whereas Ferrari, as they always did, entered under their own banner and then of course incurred all the costs themselves. For the high-speed tracks like Spa, Monza and Le Mans, the cars ran a longer tail and were known as the 512M.
All right, well, that was fun at least, trying the lead body filler this week. It's something a bit different and definitely worth getting a little bit more practice in on, but that's for another day. As we're getting there, getting it all stripped back, getting all the paint off, getting completely filthy, and hopefully we'll be able to put some epoxy primer on it very, very soon.
Oh, I never thought I'd be excited at those words, but I really, really am. I long for this to be over.
I am.
And I'm sure a lot of other viewers do too.
That's only the start.
Oh, God.
The epoxy primer is only the tip of the iceberg. There's still a lot of painting and a lot of sanding, as many of you have alluded to. A lot of sanding.
It's the sanding, yes. It's
sanding, and more
sanding. You know what? It's like keeping it real, isn't it? It's not just all glamorous. It's put her in a spray booth and
there's not much of it that's glamorous.
It's all the behind the scenes to create the perfect product.
It is.
All right, well, please like, subscribe if you haven't, and if you want to see Jeff a day earlier than the general YouTube population and without ads, which is a big bonus, follow him on Patreon.
Yep. And Facebook and Instagram as well.
Yes.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
See you, everyone.
See ya.
As Ferrari now had an influx of cash after selling half of Fiat to Porsche, this car was the 512S. This car was the new 512S, which ran a This car was the new 512. Oh my God! This car was the new. Compared to Porsche's flat-cooled 12.
Air-cooled.
It also had a heavier steel frame, and see, you just don't look. For the heights. Yeah, we got there in the end.